Okay.
Oops.
Okay.
I apologize,
okay.
everybody.
Start again.
That is right. That's the
We're not muted
look at
anymore.
the chat.
Thank you, chat. You saved us there. Welcome, everybody. State of Exile podcast episode 15, part 2, with Grinding Gear game developers Carl and Rory here on this scene. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. It's awesome that you guys came on board with that. Today's breakdown, we'll be discussing passive skill tree design, skill and support gem design, master crafting design, and game design philosophy with our two developers here. Rory, if you'd like to tell the chat here what in specific you do at Grinding Gear Games.
Sure. At the moment I'm working on skills and development. I'm currently working on improving the master's content, but I also do mostly boss design and monsters design, working on the Act 4 stuff, of course, which I can't really talk about too much, but yeah, Act 4.
It's happening. And how about you, Carl? What do you particularly deal with over there at GGG?
So mostly I do game design, game balance, and increasingly production stuff, which is sort of making sure the builds happen and the patches go out with the right stuff in them, both for the main leagues and for Taiwan, which has become increasingly a big thing.
Oh yeah, forgot all about that arena. So today, in specific, we're gonna be beating you guys up pretty hard. But just please understand that the questions came right from the community, and we've taken them from various places like the forums and Reddit. So let's get right into the meat and potatoes of this. The passive skill tree design. What was when you guys reworked the Witch and Shadow? What was your main goal here, Rory in specific?
So the primary goal was to have it so a new player starts the game and they have an idea where to go. We went with a strong formula of you start off with, you get general things that are useful for almost any build. You don't want to pinhole yourself if you decide to get the wrong thing early, and then you move out into, you're forced to move or encouraged to move through life or utility or survivability of some form, and then you get to the core cluster. So it's sort of making the 1, 2, 3 step of character progression that sort of fits with where you are at that level, and then after that the new player can expand outwards. So make it much more straightforward so they know where to go.
And now, in specific with the Witch and Shadow, I don't know if you guys noticed, but one of the biggest problems right now is that as a spellcaster in specific as Witch and Shadow, you're pretty much defaulted to go to that Scion life wheel. Was that your initial intentions? I mean, would either of you like to comment on that? Carl?
Do you want to talk about the Scion life wheel, Carl?
So there's sort of two elements to this. One is we do need to signal on the tree, what is strength, what elements sort of matter, what part of the tree matters. So the Scion life wheel does have this sort of thing that says, okay, this is in this direction. It tells you this is where the sort of the life elements of the tree happen. That being said, we do want life builds to be available for spellcasters. We do want hybrid life and ES builds to be available. So to a certain extent, for higher level characters, it doesn't really matter if they go over there because they've got access to the whole tree once you've got 100 odd points to throw away on the tree. So if you want to get a huge chunk of life, that's where you go. We do want life available in other places though, and I think we've got a reasonable amount sort of while you're leveling, and I think that helps. But I mean, if we need to move more life back into the other part, we will. That being said, percentage wise, most classes now actually have very similar amounts. The only real exception is if you want that extra life, there's one place you go to get it at the moment.
Awesome. Ziggy, do you have anything you would like to throw at him in terms of passive skill tree design?
Yeah, so on the topic of life, kind of transitioning into hybrid, I've been seeing, well, when we first saw the tree was revealed, hybrid looked like much more of a thing you guys are trying to promote. There's actually hybrid HP energy shield nodes on the tree now, which was, not so much a thing before. So that felt like it was like, big hybrid. I've always wanted hybrid to be a bit of a thing. Was that kind of your intention to promote hybrid with the new tree?
Yeah, definitely. It started with removing the cast image over time modern maps, which was a big hamstring for a lot of life ES builds. And then we started adding the passives, but we want to take it very carefully because life ES has the highest effective life pool, the highest single amount of damage they can take, unmitigated damage. So we need to be very careful with it. We can't just rush into it and give them all the tricks that every other build has. Like people have requested in regen and leech that applies to both simultaneously, which is dangerous. Like we're not ruling it out, but we want to be careful with it. We'll take it slowly. We want this relationship to go places. We're not going to rush into anything.
That analogy. So,
How do you feel it's going so far?
Do you mind if I
Hybrid.
comment on this? I actually,
Yeah, go ahead.
Act 3 Cruel, on a witch, I did this silly thing called the CI challenge. The only life nodes I picked up were the hybrids, and I was able to obtain 2500 ES with 1500 life in Act 3 Cruel, which is 4k effective life that early is pretty absurd. So I completely understand where you guys are coming from with that. It's a very scary beast. So, I mean, what are your opinions? Do you think it's a little scary if you mess around with it too much?
I haven't seen any, like, it's not a dominant, if we look at the mechanics, it's not a dominant mechanic on topic builds. I mean, Carl can comment better on the stats on this, but it's not at a super dangerous place yet. I'm happy to keep adding a little bit more to it until it gets to that we've got to nerf it stage.
So, I mean, as well as promoting hybrid life ES, the other thing we wanted to do was redeem CI a bit, particularly for CI earlier, whereas in the last leagues people were only swapping to CI very, very late in the game. So we do have the issue we want to do everything at once, and now we've seen a bit more CI and a bit more hybrid life ES, so we're pretty happy with that.
That's for sure. On the topic of CI, right before the patches went live, you guys cut up the energy shield pretty rough, as much as 2% for some skill points. Was there any reason behind that?
It was partially due to feedback from our community and partially just because we didn't want to overstate it. Like, we'd given Energy Shield a lot in the early Witch area. Like, it was much easier to slip into. We didn't want it to become dominant. And we were worried it would be. So we decided to play it safe and not let it get too much too early.
It was a right call.
The word was definitely CI before the before the patch. Everyone was raving about CI, so it would have been, yeah, bit of last minute cold feet there.
Yeah,
Seeing those hybrid specs.
So, if I may, the other thing I wanted to bring up was we mentioned about the Scion life wheel. How do you guys feel about the state of the Scion overall? She's pretty niche at the moment. I think that was always the intention, but how do you feel about how she's playing out at the moment? Any changes you want to make there?
I'll happily answer this one, as the Scion's kind of my baby, because before Rory's been doing a lot of skill tree recently, but before that it was kind of like 3 years of me, so you know, a lot of the old tree you can either blame or say good things to me about, either way. So the Scion is meant to be a bit niche. I mean, she is sort of a special case, and early on in 1.00 we probably upped the power a bit, and there was sort of like 1/3 Scions, and for a sort of a prestige class, that's way too many. I mean, at the moment, if we look at the stats, we see a few more Scions than, say, Templar. So there's a lot of Scions out there. I mean, a lot less than Witches and Shadows at the moment, but there are actually a decent number of Scions, and they sustain to high levels. So generally, we find the people who play Scions well sort of need to know the game. If you sort of go blindly into a Scion and you go, that node looks cool and this node looks cool, which is something we want people to do in other classes, that doesn't work on the Scion. It only really works if you've got a plan and you sort of execute that incorrectly.
I like that. For instance, like the 12% AoE. If you're in desperate need of AoE, you'll go into the Scion tree, but having that offered to you right away is pretty awesome, considering that you could get that 12% AoE and then still manage to get blast radius and amplify, something the Scion gets from the other classes usually don't. I do like that niche that they offer. Let's go into the Templar. Obviously, with the Invasion and Ambush release, you guys mentioned you wanted to fix Templar as well as Witch and Shadow, and it didn't seem like they got their full overhaul yet. Do you have any plans in the future to fix the Templar, or not fix, but you know, to revamp it?
Yeah. I've been looking at that stuff already, planning to do it soonish, hopefully. I mean, we would have redone the Duelist and the Marauder and the Ranger tree and the Templar tree, obviously, if we had had time for the previous passive tree overhaul. Like, I kind of consider what was done to the Marauder and Templar area to be a temporary improvement until we can really restructure the whole thing. Apply the same pathing of the core, then the utility, survivability, then the big wheels on the outer area for all those classes. So, just doing. I mean, I kind of wanted to see how people reacted to the Witch and Shadow tree redo, which was pretty positive. I think it's good enough to apply the same rules to the rest of the tree now.
I have to say, I'm like super impressed with how the shadow turned out. I feel like he captures the class so well now, and like the design of it is so much more interesting now. So if the Templar gets a similar sort of treatment, I think we'll see Templar being very popular as a result.
Pox,
So I'm very impressed with the shadow.
Yeah. I was gonna say it's super cool how it was like a complete rework as well. It wasn't even like a slight change. It was like the design in the tree is different, the nodes are different, the synergy is different, the hybrid nodes. It was really awesome the way you set it up. But one thing I'm curious to is what sparked the reasoning to remove a ton of the or the additional maximum resistances on the tree, because previously we had them, like the Marauder had the +1, and it was like all over the tree you could get these little bit of max resistances, well, on the left side. So what was the reasoning behind that, out of curiosity?
So I'll answer that one because it was a lot of that stemmed from me. So Rory's going to steer out of this one. Basically, the max resists were making it hard for monster design, to be honest, and there was just a little bit too much available for players. There's a lot of max resist on items. We've given a lot of max resistance on flasks and a lot on curses, so the amount in the tree just sort of added to that. So we just sort of cut a bit down, looked where we want to shave it off, and the tree looked like a good place. There's a little bit in there, and we might stick a little bit more in. And as well, we needed to rein in some of the really defensive builds. There's a lot of stacked defenses available at the moment. So being able to stack all the dodge, all the spell dodge, all the block, all the spell block, and as well have, well, I'm immune to physical a good portion of the time, and as well as that you're starting to approach immunity from elemental. It's just a little bit scary from our side of the fence.
Right.
Yeah, it definitely made balancing it very tricky when there were some builds that mitigated 99% of the damage she did, and that's what we kind of had to balance around.
Those Surgeon Flasks, though, 99% immunity with the Surgeon Flask. Almost always. The next thing I want to bring up is the state of Blood Magic and Mortal Conviction. Obviously, Blood Magic is primarily used in like low life builds now, almost, it seems. Is that your intention now with Blood Magic and Mortal Conviction? Is that the state where you want that to be?
So, before Auras, Blood Magic was one of the most common things to do. But the addition of Auras make that reservation just the thing. So it's interesting that Blood Magic is now used primarily as a reservation technique, like which is not really what I would like. I'd really like it to be the Marauder. I don't really want to care about mana. I'm willing to give up a little bit of survivability for that, but instead we've got the current situation of if I can't use auras, it's not worth going for. It's a trap for Marauders in some ways at the moment, which is not what we want, obviously.
Okay, fair enough.
It seems difficult to rebalance. Do you have any sort of ideas of what you want to do with that?
Not any hard and fast ideas yet. I'm looking at options, but I do want to come up with a more.
It's at the too many ideas stage at the moment.
Oh,
so it's going to
no.
get down to just one good idea.
Something.
I love Blood Magic as a player, so I hope to see it more used as like a means to cast spells and use abilities in the future. So hope you guys can come up with something for it. I'm looking forward to it.
The mechanic of it is so cool. How you use your health instead of mana, but as of right now, the drawback is too severe. So if you could find a solution to that, I think that would be so cool, and build enabling to so many builds all around the tree as well. How you see some builds go all across the tree for Iron Reflexes. How cool would it be for like a witch to go for Blood Magic because of a specific build or something? Just throwing it out there.
Something that was suggested to me was that maybe Mortal Conviction offers you one free aura, and then maybe your second aura is 50% reduced. So that way, anything after that isn't possible with these low life builds. But your first two, you can still run that 2 aura niche build. Might be a little bit too broken, but I'm sure the possibilities are endless for you guys over there. You've heard them all. Yeah. Figured as much. The next question I have at the passive skill tree before we move on to skill and gem support is the current state of staves with spellcasters. There isn't really an effective way to get block with staves. Is that your initial intention, or is that something you would like to switch towards, being able to get block with a staff while using spells?
I can't tell you exactly what we're going to do with the staff stuff, but the fact that the staff is probably going to get its own large wheel in a centered area, and we will want that to be you. If you're using a staff, you will go for that. I mean, you will, especially as a new player, and for a lot of builds, hopefully you'll go for that, and that will give you the options for spellcaster or general defense or melee. Hopefully, we'll see though.
You think of it like the wand cluster, where it's specific to wand damage. Where if you're going physical or elemental, you benefit regardless. I like that idea.
Yeah, that's cool. Staffs need love.
All right.
I had another point about the passive tree, if I may. Duelist, I feel, is a pretty interesting guy. He seems like he's a guy with an interesting backstory, but he's a bit lacking in terms of diversity. I feel like he's a little bit tunnel vision at the moment into those melee specs. I've seen maybe just a little bit of bow action. I do remember the days of closed beta where like blood magic bow duelists were quite popular, but I don't know. How do you guys feel about the state of the duelist? Is he too niche? Is it something you're going to be looking at?
He's definitely something. I mean, increasing melee build diversity, not just in the kind of weapons you used and how defensive you are, is important. And the duelist is the epitome of that. I mean, he needs different ways of fighting, other than, I mean, obviously he hits stuff, but different ways of hitting stuff with weapons. Less so with skills, more so with the passive tree and the things you can build towards the duelist is the aim. I've yet to come up with this exact solid plan for what those are going to be, but we've got options for things you can build towards as a duelist beyond specific weapon damage.
Hopefully some unarmed love. Yeah. So, let's go into the skill design. So, Rory, I'm going to totally drop the bomb here. You said on Reddit Herald of Thunder and to ask you about it. So here it is. What the heck is Herald of Thunder?
Asking.
So when we were making the heralds originally, the plan was to have fire, ice, and lightning all out at the same time. And maybe after that, look at Herald of Stone and Herald of Anarchy or something like that. I don't know. Names are not final, but so Herald of Thunder is something we've actually got working on testing at the moment in a very basic form. Currently, it's just like having Storm Herald on you all the time, so it's a little bit strong. We're working out ways to get it. Like, I want it to be you're a walking storm while it's active, but you've got to work to keep it up. It's not just like you can just AFK and let things die. But yeah, there's definitely, like, the reception to Herald of Ash has been pretty positive, and I want to do more things like that. I mean, the overkill mechanic was something I wanted to do something with for a while, and Herald of Ash is probably one of the best ways we could have gone with it. Like, we looked at other overkill mechanics, but that was my favorite of them. And I mean, I've been playing a Herald of Ice character. I mean, Glacial Cascade Herald of Ice character on live to see if I need to buff Herald of Ice, and I think the answer is probably yes. So that's probably going to get a buff soon. But yes, Herald of Thunder is coming. That's the name Heralds. The Herald names came from Herald of Thunder, so it was one of the first ones that was thought up, but it just didn't. It wasn't ready in time because of technical problems with it.
The ideas behind the Heralds.
Yeah.
Oh,
I'm curious. Sorry, Zeno. What was like the design process of Herald Thunder? Because we were kind of imagining that you guys had gone the similar route with like the burning and the free shattering and stuff. That there would be some sort of shock, but that was just too hard to balance around. Was there anything like that that's prevented, or was it just some other technical issue?
It was a pure technical issue of like the active skills on buffs being triggered by other skills and then being different on the client server, things like that, programmery things. But the inspiration from the Heralds wasn't. I mean, a lot of people suspected we were wanting to replace anger and wrath and hatred as the melee auras, but it was really more just actually wanting to add buffs. Actually, Tempest Shield was the inspiration, where it's a reservation effect that does something special that changes how you play your character, rather than just giving you a damage boost.
You know, the idea of the Heralds where upon level up you don't get this, like, when you level up hatred you really feel it, or when you level up wrath or anger, the Herald, when you level it up you get more overkill damage, or with Herald of Ice, you know, the passive damage you get isn't like astronomical. I really like that idea where you're rewarded for killing. You know, that's what levels up with the gem. So really well done there. I mean, awesome job there. So let's talk about the next one. You want to fire this one off, Pox?
All right, sure. So Do you guys have any plans for any more like self-buff skills? Because as of right now, it's very limited as to what we have. Aside from the heralds that just recently came in, there was like Arctic Armor self-buff, Tempest Shield, and I can't think of any more off the top of my head. But it's very limited. Like there's more auras than self-buff skills. Was this intended when you guys first started?
I mean, there's nothing immediately in the works that I can think of off the top of the head. There's a couple of skills we tried out and then put on hold for a bit. I mean, fire weapon is sort of something we originally talked about, and that turned into Herald of Ash, pretty much. For a while, when we went through hundreds of iterations of, well, ideas for the heralds, and some of them were buffs that, like there was a buff that refreshed every time you crit, was what Herald of Thunder originally was, where we decided to standardize and make them more reservation. But so we've looked at this stuff. My personal feeling with this stuff is that a buff is more exciting if it's delivered by a damaging skill or something like that. You know, you hit a guy and then you get a buff and that stacks or something like that, rather than a straight up cast buff. But I mean, I'm not ruling it out. Like we can definitely. We're more likely to see buffs like Blood Rage, where you've got to keep killing to keep them active and things like that.
Correct.
They're most efficient when you're actively doing stuff, rather than every 10 seconds you've got to recast your jazz and you've got to put increased duration on it just to take up less of your time.
Yep, I like that. I mean, don't forget, there
nice.
are the Val auras too. Those are buffs too. They've been released.
Encouraging killing is always a good thing, so we can't deny that by any means.
So speaking of the Val gems, has the Val gem idea going out the window for the current state of the game? Are you guys working on other things, or are we expected to see more Val gems in the future?
I definitely want to do stuff with Val gems. I mean, Atziri's Rage has subsided for now, so we'll probably wait for a bit, like let the Val gems sit as they are, and then do something. I'm hoping do something new with them, not just have new Val gems, but like maybe rework the way they work, or improve how they work with characters. Currently, they take up a gem slot that is a very valuable resource. They've got high opportunity costs, so we want to make sure they pay off. But for now, we're happy with how they are for now. We'll leave them for the moment, for the next big patch or two.
Ziggy, you want to go ahead and ask the next question for the podcast?
Yeah, I was just wondering, kind of on the same topic, how do you feel like because this is like looking at it in hindsight now, the whole Atziri's Rage thing. How do you feel like the Val Gem implementation went, and did it achieve what you guys were hoping to achieve in the game?
Do you want to talk about this, Carl? About Val Gems? You don't want to talk about Val Gems?
I can talk about Val Gems. So Val Gems were one of those things where we very much started from a design perspective first. It was like, we're starting to get a theme of sacrifice come up in this expansion. What does a gem look like if it's a sacrifice gem? And initially it was going to be, we're going to make some new skills, and after a while it was like, well, we could make all our skills like sacrifice gems. And we went through a lot of different versions of that. And I think we got a lot of what we wanted out of Val Gems, not everything. I mean, they do get used. There's even the odd crazy complete Val build where you off to kill a Zeri and you use nothing but your Val skills and you cycle through them, and before you know it, she's dead. So I think we get a lot of what we wanted, but not everything. And part of it is when the goal is to kind of make ultimates. It's something we're perhaps a little careful with it at times. So there's certainly a lot of Val skills we like. Whether they're all in the right place, probably not.
Awesome stuff. So this is one that's been coming up in chat a lot, and it's one that I've been thinking about for a long time as well. I'm gonna grab this one because this is close to my heart. You guys, can you reveal any plans for a bow movement skill? Is that at all possible?
I have had on my list, and on my list right now, bow movement skill written in text. So yes, there are plans for a bow movement skill, but I really don't want to just make it another leap slam, another lightning warp, another willing blades. I want it to have something special.
If you need some ideas, I have some ideas.
This guy.
I'm like, I'll do all your work for you if you have to, as long as we get a bow movement skill. I'm happy.
I mean, currently bows are in a very good place, and they're very popular in the meta. So it's not the highest priority in the world, but yeah, it would be nice to have lightning warp not be the bow movement skill. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm keen for a bow movement skill. We've talked about them. I mean, Barrage started out as a bow movement skill, but just turned into a simpler single target thing. So
Oh.
yeah, I'm keen. But have no immediate plans. Not coming this coming patch, sadly.
Noted.
All right.
That's okay. We heard it. Soon TM. We're cool. So this has been a topic now for a while. Chaos damage. People love chaos damage. I don't know, but added chaos is like everywhere, thanks to Ziggy. But added chaos in general. But unfortunately, there's no way to penetrate chaos. And I'm assuming because of PvP purposes, it'd be a little bit too strong. Do you have any plans in the future to address chaos resistance penetration at all?
I'd rather not. I'd rather keep chaos resistance as the special thing is that it doesn't need to worry about resistances. I removed a lot of the resistances, chaos resistance from monsters, like cut it down or removed it entirely. A lot of humanoids were resistant to chaos. Now they're not resistant to anything. So chaos should be more of the special corner case element rather than something you need to be. You have anarchability curses or anything like that. That's not really what we want to go for. We really want to keep it its own thing, and when you use it, have it be it's special in its own way.
I'm sorry. Don't just ignore chat.
The chat.
Like I said, they love it.
Chaos in the chat.
Do you guys have any other questions in regards to Rory with his gem design at all?
I have one quick question to ask, because this is something that I'm really curious about, is how do you get started, excuse me, on a gem? How does it start and how does it go through the process, if you're able to answer that in a way? Like, what gets you started? Like, how do you even create the idea? Like, where does it stem from?
These days, usually I start with a problem. Like I say, we want more buff skills. We need a bow movement skill. We need a low-level lightning skill. And then we go through all the options. I write down all my ideas. I put those ideas to people, write down all of their ideas, ask the programmers about the ideas I like, they tell me what the consequences would be and anything I've missed out. We look at how supportable they are, how many multiplicative damage stats they work with is super important, so you don't get something that's hard to support and hard to spec for, or too easy, too many things that just multiply together. Something that will create, preferably something that has multiple options. So we go through all the possible consequences of it, and then start iterating. We pick 2 or 3 of them to try out, usually the ones that are quickest to program. So we start with a very basic version of them. Programmers implement them in an hour or 2. We test them out. We put balance values on them, initial balance values, then we play with them, get the programmers to adjust them, change how sports work. So it's a very iterative process. We go through again and again, trying out different versions of the skill, trying out different ideas. I go to as many people as possible for what they think about this stuff, but ignore most of the answers and just take the good feedback and turn that into what progresses. And yeah, it goes through the QA team. They all play with it. They all try and make builds with it. Neon is the best at making the most efficient possible build, in-game build, and it's balanced based on that information. And then it's released if it's good enough. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the effects don't work out. Sometimes it doesn't fit into the game well enough, and it just sits on our list forever that we will one day revive if we feel that the game needs it at that point.
Return projectiles.
Skills are quite complicated things, so there's a lot of ways they can fail. And the effects have to be good, and they have to work in all cases, and they have to work with everything else, and in a party, and in solo, and with all the supports. And then the programming has to be good, and we don't want to have anything that screws up sync or makes anything sort of worse. And it's got to work with all the supports, and it's got to work with totems if it's a totem skill. So we've got probably a few skills which we're looking at and go, we've really got to bring this thing back, or this thing's been spiked because this effect wasn't good enough or so. So, yeah, there's quite a lot to them.
Is an interesting fact I don't think people are aware that Stormcall, Upheaval, Flame Blast were all started as different prototypes of the same skill. We had an initial plan for the skill, which was sort of a line. It was Upheaval followed by a Stormcall at the end. Which we then sort of tried out different variations and ended up making all these different 3 different skills that were pretty much started on the same skill.
That's
Oh,
interesting.
wait,
way
sorry,
to word
glacial
Glacial
it.
Beyond
cascade,
mobs now.
not upheaval. Glacial
Okay, I was
cascade
like,
is what
did I miss
upheaval.
something here? I
That's
Yeah,
fine.
sorry,
I don't want to
upheaval
sound like
was
an
called
idiot.
for ages.
That's
Okay.
I was the same way. I didn't
Alright.
want to ask it.
So
Yeah.
I noticed
I
you guys
always
brought
call
in
Dominic.
different variations of Stormcall on the Beyond mobs now. That's they're kind of they're similar. They're not exactly the same as Stormcall. Is that something that it's like almost like a test for eventual player skills, or more just like different flavor for the mobs?
That was actually Neon's initiative. The idea was that we were using Stormcall a lot on bosses. It's the perfect boss skill of you have a circle on the ground, and then after a while, if you don't get out of it, it explodes. So he requested a fire, a lightning, a physical, and an ice version made for monsters. The lightning version looks different from the player version in that you have a circle, you can actually see where it's going to explode. So that's where that came from. It all came from different, just more variation on boss skills while all still being Stormcall. And we've got a brand new boss skill coming in 1.2.3 that we used on a bunch of the mission bosses, and that we'll probably see through the rest of the game. You'll see it soon.
can't wait to dino it.
Oh.
So the next part of this segment, we're going to be going into the Beyond design, Carl. And this seems to be your niche. Let's start it off with, what were your design meta goals behind Beyond in general?
So Beyond was interesting in that it actually started with flavor rather than what are we trying to achieve. So we had a power cut in the office, then we discussed a bunch of options, and I don't remember where it originally came from, but the idea was these monsters from Beyond, and went through a lot of changes. And then there was sort of a question of, can we make them cool enough? And we're also going, fairly cheap with the leagues. Like Forsaken Masters was a really big deal, and it involved an awful lot of stuff. And it took up a lot of resources. So the leagues had to be sort of generated pretty quickly and with not too much time investment. And we did steal a bit of time for both Rampage and Beyond, which sort of made it worth it. And I get to look at people go, oh my god, if Axoth is like this sort of model or whatever from some other game, and it's going, well, they don't know, it's just actually using all existing assets, which is kind of cool.
All right, so
That kind of answer you wanted?
Yeah. That's good enough. The big one is with Beyond. How are you going to incorporate it in the game? You look at Invasion now. You got those bosses, and you kind of have the mobs in every zone. Devours, please. But how are you going to incorporate Beyond into the game?
So I'll quickly mention it about the Invasion. Part of that was testing a new pack system, which did sort of need to go in for a variety of reasons. Like the old one we're kind of at the edge of what we could do with it, and we needed a more flexible one. But it does require a lot of tuning and a lot of stuff going onwards, whereas the bosses would just sort of filled some gaps. For Beyond, it doesn't really fill sort of an ongoing niche. It's sort of like an interesting thing, and it's nice to have this kind of threat available, but it's obviously not something we could say, and now from then on there'll be these Beyond bosses all the time, because that's not really going to work. We've had a few discussions, and I'm sure we'll see it again in a few different ways, but it's obviously not going to be, and now every act there's these monsters from Beyond.
Yes, that.
Yeah. Yep.
The last thing I want is Devourers and Beyond mobs always. So
I wanted to ask about like the meta impacts of Beyond, and we've talked a few times about, we feel like the game is Beyond either favors stacking a lot of very powerful defensive mechanics, which has always kind of been the case for PoE. It's nothing really new, but I feel especially Beyond is promoting very, very high DPS or very go fast builds, things that can kill and clear very quickly. Do you guys sort of intend that at all, or are you interested in that, or is it something you'd like to pursue more? How do you feel about this kind of meta shift?
It's nice to see some DPS in the hardcore league. Normally we find there's a lot of zero damage kind of builds that pop up, and they kind of work. It's just that they sometimes look a bit boring for people looking at it, and we sort of, we actually get complaints saying there's this problem with your game. I've been watching it for ages, and usually from people who aren't playing or just sort of watch the streams. So it's actually nice to see a bit more excitement and a bit more damage out there. But there's not just Beyond feeds into that. There's a few other things that sort of allow a bit more damage to be out there. But that being said, you're saying it's damage with defenses. It's interesting to see we probably had it slow down play a little bit much and make people a little more cautious. It was definitely meant to make people feel the risk that every time, once you get close and you start seeing those red orbs on the ground, you know you're in a bit of trouble. But it's not really meant to be that big of a speed bump. It's meant to be a threat rather than something that slows you down for a large period of time.
And honestly, right now, it's like Ziggy was mentioning last podcast. You would get in a map. You would for example, mudflats. You'd pick up all three things. Then you would go right away to lower submerge. Now it's like you're trying to pick up all three things, but there's boxes, there's these new invasion mobs everywhere, and now there's beyond mobs. And it's like you end up investing 10 to 15 minutes sometimes in a zone, which you normally are supposed to spend maybe 3 minutes in the old meta. Was this your intentions with beyond and the ambush boxes, or do you think it's something you need to readdress?
Well, we don't mind people taking a bit of time in a zone, particularly if there's interesting stuff for them to do. I think we've had a few complaints about the Beyond bosses not dropping enough, but actually in aggregate, in the hardcore league, there's actually a lot more stuff. The Beyond bosses are dropping more XP and more loot, and we do see the results of that. So there, I think while it slows you down, it's not really at too much of a cost.
Okay. I mean, that's a fair enough answer for me. And then
I actually
enjoy
it. I was saying I enjoy it. I like seeing a different scenery. As said, like when you're walking by and then you see a jeweler's strongbox, you're like, oh, like that. There's a possible chance at an upgrade there. Let me hawk it. Let me vol orbit, etc. And then you're running by and you find a corrupted zone and you find something else, and not even it's just a change of scenery. Like it's all like positive stuff for your character, and I really like that coming from all the way back from closed beta. Watching the game transform with all these new things that are added in. So I really like the way it's going, personally.
My last question about the whole Beyond League is, with the introduction to Invasion everywhere, in terms of not just the mobs, not the bosses being introduced, I've actually received more negative feedback streaming that people are just like, I wish the zones had what they originally had. You knew what you had to prepare for. Is this something that you plan to keep around forever, or is this something you may eventually take out in the game? Or just specific zones?
So there are advantages and disadvantages to the guest monstering. I mean, it is good to mix things up a bit, but I certainly can tell that once we've sort of like established a baseline of what people understand, there's only so far they're wanting to go from that. So I think it does make that particularly merciless. Like early on, there's much less variation, and the variation heightens as you go through the difficulty. So in Merciless, it's good. I think we've got some guest packs in there, but we're still sort of potentially finding the right level. At the moment, it does seem a little bit too much for some people, but we definitely want some of that variety and some of that surprise when you go into a zone.
I think that's all I have for Beyond. Do you guys have any things you want to touch on?
I just thought just you were talking about like the way the game looks and feels when people are playing like lower DPS specs, and with it being like a a game of hardcore trying to stay alive and stuff like that. That was definitely my approach in the past, and I definitely had something to offer to the low DPS ends of the spectrum. But I have to say, with the new Beyond design, it certainly pushed and compelled me to play higher DPS specs, and I enjoy the game more now, and it looks better. So I guess I wanted to bring that up. I think that's been a pretty positive impact. If you can win me over to the DPS side of things, then I think you're doing all right. I think it's going well. Yeah, I'm enjoying it, so I think that's good. That's the last point I wanted to throw out.
A quick question that it's on the Beyond League, but it's kind of like a weird question. When you were designing the Beyond the Beyond mobs, did you have like this? Like, did you know it was gonna affect your map drop rate? Like, did you think at all? Like when it came to that, because like Beyond mobs with map drops is insane with how much you gain from it. I was just curious if you thought it was gonna, like, did you have any idea in any type of way, just out of curiosity?
So certainly we did find with other leagues in the past, particularly things that are difficult, there's usually that sort of risk versus reward thing, and we still got a reasonable amount of people saying, well, the reward's not there for Beyond, which we thought a bit unfortunate, because if you looked at it, there definitely were the drops did add up, even if you didn't feel it on maybe one kill. So I mean, having the maps available there is probably, I'd say, Beyond monsters aren't adding as much as some elements of other elements of the game at the moment, but we do want people to feel that they're getting something out of these extra monsters.
I think it's at where it needs to be. I mean, obviously, when it first came off, that life regen, extra resist, and then you get 2 blues was very, what's the best word to describe it? Disheartening. But now I think it's where it needs to be, especially when you get into maps and you finally find Zana and all those other ways to get maps, and then the beyond the chances. I think it's fine where it is. So let's go into the unique design. This is your baby, isn't it, Rory?
It used to be unique items used to be my baby, but Nick, the new designer, has taken over a lot of that stuff. But so Carl and I will have to answer these questions together.
Okay. So there's a lot of people here involved in unique designs at various steps down along the way, and everyone cares about it a great deal. So we've probably got more opinions than we have people on unique design.
Obviously, when it comes to releasing unique, there's so much fine tuning involved, or otherwise we end up with Legacy, Soul Taker, for example. I can only imagine the thought process in general. The first one I want to touch about is the bomb, the Atsiri gloves. Why did you choose to make them rarer rather than nerf them?
That's an interesting question. So the first thing I'll discuss was where they were pitched in the first place. So leading up to Sacrifice of the Veil coming up, we had a lot of parallel development. So we'd done a lot of testing with the gloves, and then we were also having a lot of balance changes at the same time. So where they were pitched, especially as far as Leech went, was kind of interesting, because we kind of tested them with the old Leech, and then the new Leech came in, and we kind of revisited them when, well, they're very good, but and it's often hard to precisely work out exactly how good they are. And they weren't potentially meant to be as universally good as they turned out to be. That being said, once something's in the game and people, sort of develop a like of something, it's quite hard to pitch it down in ways that are satisfying to everyone involved. And there were a lot of people on standard with these gloves. So the kind of the genie was out of the bottle. We may revisit them again later. So we thought, well, one, we wanted in this league not to nerf too many uniques, or not to change the uniques up too much, which we seem to do pretty well at. We changed a few, but there were less changes than we might otherwise do. So we kind of wanted to put the gloves where we want the Uber Atsiri drops to be excellent. I mean, and we were sort of experimenting with drop tables for that fight. Rather than having, it just drops from the same drop pool as everything else. So we thought, well, we can pitch this in a way where it's not really a big issue in the temporary leagues, particularly when they're 3 months. Like, you might see 1 or 2, but they're not really going to be a huge issue. So partially it's an experiment, but partially we know we've got the ability to do that, and it shouldn't make too much impact in those 3 months.
Yeah, you'd be lucky to see 2 with that drop rate in a 3-month league, and even to get up to Uber Atsiri in that time frame. So, agreed there. Standard league's a whole nother story in itself with the gloves. So let's see, what else you want to discuss with the unique Ziggy or Pox? Do you have any questions in particular?
Yeah, I'll bring up the next one. This is something I'm seeing people sort of talk about more and more. And I've definitely noticed it myself when building characters for Beyond, is that unique chests seem to have really taken over the slot. Like, rare chests offer... It's funny, I talk about on stream often that Lightning Coil is not fun. Lightning Coil is anti-fun. It's, it's got the negative penalty, it's hard to get a 6-link on it. It's just like, oh, I need a Lightning Coil so I can stay alive, but it's just not that fun. But... whereas, getting like a 6-link rare chest is much easier in comparison to these 6-links uniques. But we're seeing things like Lightning Coil, Cloak of Defiance, and Belly of the Beast. Those top 3, that trio right there, really dominate the chest slot. How do you guys feel about the meta for this at the moment? And is this something you're okay with?
I'll start the answer on this one and then pass over to Rory. So the first thing I'll note is the chest slot is a very iconic slot, so it does tend to end up with good things in it, and it's often one that sort of supporters like to build for. And yes, there is a bit of a dominance with unique chests, particularly ones which offer a different kind of defensiveness. It is much worse in Beyond than Rampage. There's like a very different story there. If I have a quick look at the stats, so the top sort of 3 uniques and beyond, Lightning Coil, and this is actually level 80 plus, I should specify that, so I'm looking at the very high level play. Lightning Coil, Cloak of Defiance, and then Stone of Lazwa. And much to our surprise when we checked them, Bully the Beast is actually a long way down. So it is really the ones that offer an alternate defense that are up there. So there's probably about a fifth of Bully of Beast compared to Lightning Coil and Cloak of Defiance added together. Whereas if I swap my stats to Rampage, just hold on. Then we've got a different story. If we look at the top 5, we've got Orsees, Malagaro's Virtuosity, and that's a whole other story. So in Rampage, like crit's much more important than lowering your defenses. And then it's Zero's Promise, and then Rat's Nest and Doyani's Invitation. So there's a completely different story there. Once we start getting down to the chests, we do start to get like Cloak of Defiance is up there. But then Lightning Coil's not so popular. You'll see Alpha's Hell before that, and Carcass Jack. Like Carcass Jack, again another chess piece that defines thing. And I love that unique, but I mean, in all these cases we've perhaps overvalued the special things these chests give you and still give you too much normal defenses. So Lightning Coil gives you a defense you wouldn't otherwise get. Cloak of Defiance definitely gives you a defense you wouldn't otherwise get. Carcass Jack gives you defenses and a cool additional thing. And it's got fairly high life, considering it's also the only way to really go full AoE in the game, like complete AoE. Rory.
You kind of said almost everything that I was going to say, but the it's good that there is diversity in which unique chess pieces you build for. I mean, that we hadn't had this in the past when unique chests were superior, so it's good that it's much more diverse now. But yeah, we would like to make rare chess pieces more valuable. Exactly how we're going to do that remains to be seen. I'd rather not just flat out nerf these things, but instead give rare chess pieces something uniques don't have immediate access to, like slightly higher stats or some other benefit. We'll see as to what that is, but yeah, it's something we're aware of.
That was really interesting, guys. Especially love the stats. So good.
I like that.
Do you mind if I ask a question now? In terms of uniques, I understand when someone spends $1,000 to work with them. I've seen the whole process through Hegemony's era. It was a really cool process. Now, when uniques get made, things I want to address in specific is Oro Sacrifice and Hyone's Fury. Oh man, you can get some awesome damage, but you end up killing yourself. I don't understand these uniques. Why do these uniques exist? Where I mean, you just end up destroying yourself. I mean, you look at it and you're like, oh my god, damage, and then you're just instantly, turned off by the fact that you're gonna die. It's like the Christmas Story. I'm gonna shoot your eye out.
I can't remember the exact history of the supporter unique, so I may be just flat out lying here, but I'm pretty sure the supporters requested this to be a very high risk if you're playing hardcore with this item. Like they want it to be a big risk, big reward thing, which is, I mean, there's very few ways we can get uniques to do more damage than rare items, and that is one of those ways is having a massive downside, like you're gonna die. So the Hyone's Fury, the Flicker Strike sword was all about. The aim was a Flicker Strike sword where you want to be constantly moving. You want to be building up and losing your frenzy charges rapidly.
Both seem to be that way.
To avoid damage. Yeah. And Oro's Sacrifice was just awesome fire damage at a cost, and the cost was survivability. We started off with reserving a portion of your life, but that has technical issues, so we went against that.
Fair enough. Yeah. Wow. Pox, do you have any questions about unique design at all before we go to the next one?
Yeah, just one really quick question. Can we expect to be seeing more one-handed unique axes out of curiosity? Since we're very limited as to what we can see there. Is there any
yes
design?
Yes.
Okay, that's really cool. Then
Awesome.
I'm excited for that. That's really cool.
I think there's at least one a long way through the pipeline at the moment, and there's definitely been some one-handed axes in there. But if you ask that about any slot, we're probably going to say yes, unless you're talking about strength, intelligence shields, in which case we've got a lot of those already. There might be some more, but only after we fill up some other gaps.
Freaking oh.
Fair enough.
Yes. All right, so let's go into the master crafting design and impacts. The most awesome thing about this freaking expansion. I mean, you guys have obviously put forth a lot of time and effort with the Forsaken Masters in general. You can tell there was a lot of development time put in there. But what was your initial intention with the master crafting in general, Carl?
So it was going to have a few roles. So there was definitely a desire to fill a remedial role where people could quickly get okay items pretty quickly and not be blocked at any stage in the game. We didn't want it to... We still wanted people to always want new items beyond that and be keen to roll new items. But we did want to sort of be able to be able to fill the gaps very well. As well as that, we wanted to support people doing a few interesting things that they couldn't do already. And as well, we wanted some stuff in there that was a bit scary for us, where we wanted, as well as this, we've got to do something for the hardcore crafters and not just in the temporary leagues. Like standard is a completely different world, but we need something for our long-term standard players as well. I think we kind of fit that pretty well in all those cases.
And overall, how would you guys say it turned out?
Overall, pretty good. There's a few things which, you know, we've got to look at and readjust slightly. Not everything's at the level we want it, but we're pretty pleased overall, and the response has been great.
Oh, yeah. I've never seen so much positive feedback about a game at launch. Usually it's just a bunch of whining and QQ. No, not with this expansion at all. So props. Ziggy, you want to fire off the next one?
Yeah, we talked a lot about in the first half of the podcast, especially physical weapon crafting and also the use of the Elrian mod. So the first was kind of two sides to this, I guess, was looking for high like flat fizz or using the granite mods to craft high flat fizz using the vendor recipes. And then, you know, using master crafting the rest of the way. Or there's this new method where you take a one stat item with a perfect like tyrannical or flaring, yeah, something like that, and then you use a regal on that, and then use the Elrian mod with a 3-stat rare, and then craft it the rest of the way. How do you guys feel about this like meta of crafting? Are there any problems there?
So there's a bit of love and hate for this particular path, and it's really nice to see people going for understanding and mastering the system where they go, I'm going to get flaring, and it's particularly interesting to see a one mod regal, and that's sort of like an interesting path and something we're just sort of theorizing for, and we knew that there was a bit of risk with the Elrion mod. That being said, this particular weapon path goes a little deep for us. Like, it cuts what I've been interested in rolling an item for quite a while. Like, you know, you make one of these moderately early and you stick with it for a while, and it's a long way into the game where you're going, I could probably make myself a better weapon. But there's not any one thing that really makes that the case. There's a few interesting things. One, flaring is the damage roll that doesn't tail off in rarity compared to like the sort of the high tier damage rolls, the high percentage rolls. We've probably mispriced the Elrian mod. I mean, it was nice to say, well, there's a lot of these being made, but the divines are disappearing, and then it's like, oh, except a while back, Tabula became a bit more common than it used to be, which is good in general, but it does mean there is this store of divine orbs able to be entered into the economy. It's like people can take their tabulas out of their stash and turn it into a divine, and there's an Elrion craft. So we may change the price of that, and we may look at flaring a little bit, but we're not going to sort of take this and turn it off, basically, and we're not going to make a big change that sort of ruins it. We still want this path to exist. It's just that we've probably missed the pricing in a couple of things, and we may have just had a few things that have combined to make this particular path a little bit better than we intended.
So pricing is a good way to like go about balancing that. An idea we came up with earlier though was the idea of the Elrion mod only allowing 2 extra mods on top of that instead of being able to craft the 3 extra mods. So it has a limited, can add 2 more mods, something like that. I don't know, would that be a solution, do you think?
It is kind of interesting. It can do more than 2 mods. So I mean, we did when we looked at all the meta mods, and it wasn't the Elrion one wasn't one we necessarily considered the most scary, but it's certainly more interesting if there's a sort of a theoretical 5 mod item you can make out of it, or you can fill quite a few gaps. So I mean, we could limit it to 2, but if we can do it without limiting it, then we'd like to do that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Fair enough.
All right, so the next one in specific is the impacts of trading. You know, the impacts of trading. Was your initial intention for people to actually like search for items that they can craft now? And for instance, if an item rolls, like decent stats, but isn't that GG item, were you trying to encourage the player to, learn more of the prefixes and suffixes in order to trade these items? Were you trying to change up the economy, basically?
So we were certainly wanting to change things up. I mean, one of the sort of unstated goals was we kind of want to shift things far enough that no one's really going to know where they stand when the leagues start, and I think we achieved that. It was probably more important for us to make sure there was a path for someone who was choosing not to trade. And we hear a lot about self-found a bit, but I mean, a lot of the crafting was, if you're not trading, we're not necessarily going to say you're going to get to the same place everyone else is, but there will be a path for you, and you're not going to get like a hard block that's going to lock you out of the game for a long period of time where you're just sort of grinding for something that fills a particular gap. That being said, we have been interested in watching how it's affected trading. I mean, there is sort of two kinds of rares we're starting to see. There's like the crafted rare, and there's still the good rolled rares. So I mean, it's certainly not killed Eternal Exalt crafting, but it's interesting seeing that there are these different paths to your crafting, and people having quite a mix of different kind of items on them. And the sort of arbitrage, like the mastery of the system. Anytime where we see, say, a system involves people making YouTube videos explaining it to other people, we know we've done something right as far as the depth and the mastery of the system goes.
Awesome. I like that.
All right, so changes experience with leveling and masters. Obviously, right now you've seen some people hit level 100 immediately. Well, not immediately, but within 3 weeks, which is pretty fast compared to normal. With the masters, however, though, if with the normal gameplay, you're finding them across time and without farming them per se, was your intentions to have a level 8 master about the same time you would achieve level 100, or did you want it to be sooner than that?
So it wasn't compared specifically against the level 100 thing. So level 100 is kind of easier than it used to be, particularly because of the 2% hard minimum for experience, which actually had a much bigger impact on leveling than I think people realise, and it kind of means things like Untainted Paradise, that hard cap of you can't get less than 2% experience from this, means it's still worth doing later, whereas previously by the balance, a 66 map, regardless of how good it would have never been worth it. So that's had a big effect. But still, most people aren't going to level 100 as their goal. Mostly there's a bunch of people who kind of get to 92 and it sort of becomes a bit much effort, and people get to 96 and they go, actually it's a lot of effort to get to 100. Whereas I think people are going to surprise themselves getting moderately high level with masters. I mean, the initial sort of internal design goal was, if you're doing your dailies and normal play, you'll probably get one of your masters to 8 by the end of the period. I don't know if we hit that exactly, and we haven't quite excuse me, haven't quite got the daily level right, which we're looking at. But that being said, at the moment, people going hard at it can get all their masters to 8 by basically putting in a bunch of time in a week or two. It may not feel like that for many people, but the people we've seen get to all 8s, it's basically because they go, okay, now I'm going to concentrate on this, and then they sort of go for it and succeed at it.
Okay, so you actually think in the current state of the game, the master's leveling experience is actually where you want it to be, where it's either you focus on leveling towards 100 or you focus on your leveling your masters. To clarify.
So one thing that is important is that you don't actually need your level 8 master. A lot of the really important mods you get actually very early. Like you'll find when you get your master to level 3 or level 4, you get a lot of your mods. And there's a bit of special stuff that happens at level 8, but if you don't get to level 8, you're not really missing out that too deeply. Although perhaps, like I said, we may have mispitched the Elrion crafting mod and we might need to reprice that. But mostly when you're hitting level 8 with your master, you're getting a bunch of special stuff which doesn't really matter that much in the big scheme of things. I'd certainly expect, if you're a serious player who puts a fair bit into the game, the kind of person who plays at least some every day, you'll definitely be getting into level 7 with most of your masters, and I'd say it's likely you're approaching 8 on one if you're deciding, oh, what, this is my master and I'm going to stick with this one. If that's not the case, then we probably need to revisit the numbers, and I think we've got some stuff meant to stop exploits, which maybe is a little heavy-handed, and we just need to look at that and make sure it's in the right place.
Do you guys have any other questions in specific to crafting at all, Pox, Ziggy?
No, I'm good.
No, I think that was pretty good for crafting. Thanks.
All right, so we're about at the end here, guys, and I want to say thank you very much for coming on and definitely giving out some spoilers to keep everybody entertained, to include us. We love those spoilers, and it means a lot that you guys took some time out of your day to wake up first off early, and then I know Monday's your busiest day, so thank you very much for tuning in. Carl, you said you wanted to say some things here at the end?
So I was just going to say, if you've managed to find your way to this podcast, you're not familiar with the game, if you go to pathofexile.com, all one word, sort of pathofexile.com, you'll be able to find a link to download. It is free to play, so feel free to give it a go, and there's no pay to win. It's like all the microtransactions are cosmetic only, so that might be of interest to you.
Oh, no pay to win here. It is free to play. I almost screwed that one up. So, one last thing I want to bring up. Elemental Hit. I saved this one for the end, just for you, Rory. Can you please drop a bomb on us
a little on in there?
about Elemental Hit, for the love of God?
He's going to give this one to me, I can tell.
Oh, he's muted.
I think Rory's muted.
Yep, okay, sorry. Wrong screen. Okay. Elemental Hit is one of those very... it's been in the game a long time. It's constantly discussed. Like, we always talk about, we want to make Elemental Hit easier for players to understand, less dangerous. Like, whenever we make it powerful, it becomes the meta, and that it's damage for mana, which is not something that attacks get. So you get the attack speed of a weapon with the damage of a spell, pretty much. So it is a dangerous mechanic. We often try and release, like, Burning Arrow was kind of Elemental Hit for fire, and we've got a few other skills. We release them to be a kind, like, they started off as this is the new Elemental Hit and ended up as this is Burning Arrow. So we've kind of, like, it's a dangerous thing to play with. We'd rather add new skills and leave Elemental Hit as its sort of niche thing. If we have a randomized elements skill, that's totally cool, but we're not going to replace Elemental Hit with it, and we're probably not going to change Elemental Hit up too much. Maybe. I might be lying out my teeth.
Oh, come on.
I might be lying out my teeth.
So much salt.
Oh, man, the salt is
I have
real.
to say, guys, thank you for coming on today. It was really interesting, especially like some of the stats and insights into some of the things you guys talked about today. So I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
It
Awesome.
was a lot of fun. A lot of insights to be learned.
You know the Ice Buck Challenge, you always pass on to the next person. What GGG dev would you guys recommend us to hound out for episode 20?
I don't know if I could inflict that on anyone. No, there's a couple of people. That was a joke. There's a couple of people, but I'll talk to them about it. I'll see if I can convince them for you,
Awesome.
but I won't throw them in the deep end.
It's not so bad. We don't prod you too much. Thank you very much again, guys. Yeah, I really appreciate you coming on. I also want to say thank you to Twitch for getting this Path of Exile the much needed attention it needs. Every podcast we're on the front page hyping up this game. Thank you again, Twitch, for doing this, and thank you, mods, viewers, everybody there in chat that continues to support this game. It really means a lot that you guys are in here. Thank you again, Carl and Rory. That's it. That's all we got.
Thanks, guys.
All right,
Thank you.
See you
See you.
later.
Bye.